most people think that they can just pretend that terrible things haven't happened to them, and that if they just keep moving or distract themselves enough, that eventually enough time will pass that it will be like they really never experience the pain. But it doesn't work that way. You know, our brains will never allow us to forget our most painful experiences, because that's its job, is to protect us. So it remembers things that caused us immense suffering so that we can try to avoid similar forms of suffering in the past. And the thing is even if we choose to, or are not able to at the moment, to consciously become aware of, or choose to become aware of the pain we've experienced, our subconscious mind knows that we've experienced immense suffering. And that's why individuals who have like repressed trauma, particularly from childhood, can have, it's very common that they have chronic pain conditions or other health conditions like autoimmune disorders, because they're like, their mind is playing on replay all of these memories, and it's keeping the individual's body on high alert, looking out for danger. But the individual doesn't realize sometimes that their brain is on high alert. And so that's why it's very common for those of us who have experienced a lot of trauma, particularly in early life, to experience chronic pain conditions, because we're in that fight or flight mode, and our muscles are stiffening up and like preparing for action. And that's why we can feel tightness in our muscles and feel knots. Like I can feel palpable knots in many of my muscles. And whenever I go to a massage therapist, they're always like, relax, Stephanie, relax. And it's hard. It's really hard for me to let go, because I just feel like I'm always on guard. And with having a lifetime of trauma starting at a young age, it makes perfect sense. And why I'm saying all this, because it seems to be a recurring theme that I'm getting with my clients recently, and people reaching out to me with questions about people, either me pointing it out to them or people bringing up to me that they're finally starting to recognize why they're always moving, or why they're always consuming themselves with TV or social media. And they're realizing, either on their own or I'm pointing out to them, that it could be because they're trying to distract themselves from painful memories. And we all do it. We all do it with work, exercise, TV, social media, eating, talking, gossiping. There's all different ways that we can avoid painful memories, painful emotions. And my hair is doing crazy things here with the wind today. Sorry. I'm always have some sort of distraction in my outside videos. Forgive me. But we're always trying to push away our pain in some way. And if you haven't realized it already, I'm hoping you start to realize that it doesn't work. That our pain hasn't gone anywhere. It's still there. And it's never going to leave. But what we can do is make it a little easier to handle and have it affect our lives less drastically if we face it head on. And that's the scariest thing to do, and that's why people don't like to stop, because they don't want to face their tragedy head on. They don't want to face their pain head on, because they're so scared of getting stuck there. They're so scared that if they think about it, they're going to be overconsumed with emotions and they're not going to be able to handle it. So they just don't go there. And that's why it's really important, before you start going there, start facing your traumas and whatever painful memories from your past. Before you face them head on, you must have self-care practices in place to deal with the overwhelm that will come when you start to remember things you chose to pretend didn't happen, even though they did. You know, this is why I didn't actually count how many men had sexually violated me until my late 30s. And I didn't acknowledge that 3 of them were family members until my late 30s. But, I just tried to just keep moving. I just pushed away my feelings with work, with exercise, with food, and just tried to pretend that none of it happened. Put a smile on my face, and I kept on trucking, pretending that everything was okay. But really, these traumas were infiltrating every single aspect of my life, even though I tried to pretend they didn't happen. And these traumas, even though I tried to pretend they didn't happen, affected my relationships, they affected my health, they affected my career, they literally affected every single aspect of my life. And I liken it to like a little child having something to say, but they're not being heard. And what do they start doing? They become louder, they scream louder, they make louder noises, they start moving more, all in an effort to be noticed. And I feel like that's what it is with our traumas, that we pretend, like they didn't exist. We just think they're going to go away, but they're like that angry little child that just wants to be seen, that just wants to be heard. And our traumas just start playing themselves out in very, sometimes annoying ways, and ways that we don't realize are related to the trauma. The child, for example, that may be wanting you to pay attention to them may want to see a drawing that you just did, but instead, because they're not being noticed, may go and start throwing toys across the room, like something that's completely unrelated to why they were getting your attention in the first place. And I say this because sometimes our traumas affect us in ways that aren't directly related to the actual trauma. And that's why it's important to start acknowledging that, one, your traumas happen, but actually to bring awareness to how they're playing out in your life and the different aspects of your life, your career, your finances, your health. Because you can't change anything unless you first become aware of the issues. Become aware of how things from your past are living in your present life. But again, it's hard. And so you have to have practices in place to handle, the onslaught of memories that may come, especially when you first start addressing pain from your past that you haven't acknowledged for years and maybe ever. And that's why I think I didn't start addressing my traumas from my childhood and teens until my late 30s, because before then I was barely surviving. I didn't have the coping mechanisms in place to handle acknowledging that 8 men sexually violated me and 3 of them were family members. I don't think I could have handled that before my late 30s, because I wasn't ready and didn't have the proper ways to handle it. I would have just hurt myself, and I think I knew that. Like, in many ways I knew that I wouldn't be able to handle it. And so if you do find yourself continuing to move and overeat or watching TV and social media because you're trying to avoid certain feelings, it may be necessary for you to start working on self-care first before you address and start facing any of these memories and uncomfortable feelings. Come up with a plan that you will implement if you start to become overwhelmed. Like, think about it. Okay, what are you going to do if you get flooded with emotion? Are you going to listen to music? Are you going to call a friend? Are you going to go for a walk? Are you going to do some deep belly breathing exercises? What is it that you're going to do if you become overwhelmed? And practice them. Practice doing these activities first to see how they work and to tweak it, and so that it'll be accessible to you when you need it. And as you build your confidence that you can handle moments of overwhelm, you'll start to be able to, little by little, face your difficult emotions head on. And when you do, it's very liberating, because now I am able to see, like, if I'm engaging in negative self-talk or negative self-talk about another person, I am able, or I'm worrying, I'm definitely a worrier, and what I can see is the relationship between what I am worried about in that moment, the insecurity I'm experiencing at that moment. I can usually relate it back to a past trauma or past painful experience, and I'm able to acknowledge, no, this is coming from a past story. This is coming from a victimizer. This is coming from somebody else that was hurting, who hurt me because of the pain they were in. I'm able to see how, in the moment, my past is playing itself out in my present life in real time. But it took time to get to this place. And again, I couldn't do it without having self-care practices in place to handle the moments of overwhelm, to prevent them from getting to a point where I, before I would be so scared I couldn't stop it, I'm prone to becoming very depressed, and so I have to have, so like 10 years ago, if I started to address that I, was sexually violated by 8 men, I don't think I could handle it. I was suicidal. So I don't think that was the right time to be addressing all of my traumas. Today, I may still get a little down, but it doesn't incapacitate me. I have practices that I can do that will prevent me from going down into the place of complete distress that I used to go into. And this is where therapy has been really helpful, and having, friends that I can talk to that are very close to say, these past memories are coming up, or just going through my journal. I used to keep a written journal, but now, so I encourage you to do that as well if you're not ready to talk to other people about your feelings yet. You can work them out with yourself. And I did, again, used to keep a written journal. Now today I like to use Google Keep on my phone. And with Google Keep, there's a microphone option, and you can talk, and it will type what you're writing. And I like that. And actually, for me, because I'm a writer and my coaching practice is largely based on the work I've done on myself and helping my clients through similar work, I'm able to take my, the things I write about and think about, I'm able to use it for other purposes for me. So I really love Google Keep, but other people like to write. And other people like to type, so you may have a document where you type into the computer. And so I'm just giving you some options to think about, like, how else can you start working through some of these experiences that you've been trying not to face, but will need to face at some point if you want them to stop impacting your life. And please don't kid yourself. They are impacting your life, even if you choose not to acknowledge it. It's the reality, and resisting it doesn't make it true, So it is, our past is going to affect us if we choose not to face it. But the reality is we may not be able to face it today. So maybe today you focus on getting prepared for another day to face your pain. And don't face it all at once, just little by little, start to acknowledge it. And what you're going to find, like I have, is it's very freeing. I actually feel like the more that I've faced my story, the less hold it has on me. Each time I say it, it gets easier to say. And it's like I'm releasing it each time I tell my story. And each time I tell my story, I have the opportunity to shift the meaning behind it. I get to look at it differently. And the more I talk about it and the more I shift the meaning of the story and the significance it's had on my life, the more I can lessen the impact that it has on my future narrative. Our past will always be a part of us, but it doesn't need to hinder our progress going forward. It will, of course, but we can minimize its impact on our future life if we can recognize when it's playing itself out and call it out for what it is. pain from our past, and being able to distinguish between the present and the past, and being able to say, well, that was then and this is now, and I'm okay now. It's just memories now. I'm safe, and I just got to figure out how to deal with memories. And I know it's hard to think about it, but the reality is the memories are a lot easier to deal with than the trauma itself. And so if you survived after the trauma, you can survive the memories of the trauma. And it's always interesting to think that we think that we can't survive the memories, but we survived the worst of it. And I encourage you to think about that the worst is actually over. The trauma's over, and now you're just dealing with a memory. And you're just trying to figure out how can you soften the memory or handle it in a way that makes it easier to move forward. And that's why, in my practice, I utilize reframing a lot, changing perspective. But we can only start shifting our perspective on our trauma when we start acknowledging our trauma. And before we can do that, we have to first have the self-care practices in place. And so please let me know if you have any questions along the way of how to start facing your story, and about how to, about if you need more ideas for self-care practices to prepare to handle your story. I'm, of course, always happy to help. So thanks for listening. Bye for now.